Anyway, good morning. My name is Tim McGrain. I'm the director of the museum, and I'd like to welcome you to our monthly speaker series this month featuring Andrew Frankl. So, Andrew is a native of Hungary, where he left in 1956 to go to the United Kingdom. He attended the University of Sheffield and also worked for Ford Motor Company. From that point on, I think he's been a car person all his life. Andrew's going to share with us a lot of stories of his life, and he's got a book that's recently been published. But he's currently the Grand Prix editor and features writer for the wonderful FORZA magazine. Those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's worth picking up and having a read. And he also is a European correspondent for a Autochannel, which is an automotive website. Bill Maloney, who created Autochannel, is actually a good friend of the museum. Bill has the tough task of getting up to go to work every day in Hawaii. Anyway, I'm going to introduce Andrew and have Andrew share with us some stories. After Andrew's presentation, we're going to include a session. We're going to ask Andrew some questions. We've got half a dozen questions we're going to ask him. And then after that, we're going to open it up to the floor for Q&A for those of you who may be interested. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you very much. As they say, this is working. Well, good morning, and really thank you very much for coming in this pretty awful weather. I owe a very special thanks to the Blackhawk Museum. In 1995, or was it 85? I can't remember. Anyway, 20 years ago, a lovely man from Ford Motor Company said to me, why don't you come to the Blackhawk? Edsel Ford's going to be there. You'll be meeting lots of people. So I came along, met Edsel, and then he said, well, the guy you really ought to meet is a guy called Jay Lamb. And Jay Lamb, very, very fine journalist, said to me, hey, I work for Ross periodicals, Porsche magazine, and this magazine, and that magazine. And then he said, do you know anything about Ferraris? I said, bit. So I said, look, we're just launching a new magazine called FORZA. Come and say hi to the editor, Henry Rasmussen, and see what happens. So sure enough, following day I turned up. I had nothing on me except a photograph of Nicky and yours sincerely shaking hands. And I said, Henry, this is all I can show you. But he said, okay, let's try. Well, that was 132 issues ago, and best part of 15, 18 years ago. I've been working for the magazine ever since. But more to the point, so as they say, Blackhawk Museum, I owe you a big one. But I also have to make a confession. My motor racing career has been minimal. After Ford Motor Company offered me a job, I thought, well, this whole motoring thing is just easy peasy. Why don't I go to Brands Hatch, not too far from where the executive director used to live? And surely I'm going to be the next world champion. I mean, it's a given. So I went to Brands, and I've also successfully managed to kill my telephone. Thank you very much. I got into a Lotus Cortina, not dissimilar to something that you've just seen up on the screen. I did my 4 laps of Brands in this Lotus Cortina. Then I got into a single-seater. And I started Formula Ford, started zapping around. I said, well, this is it. I'm going down the straight, which is not really straight, as those who've been Brands know it's a bit like that, but nevertheless, it is the straight. And I could see the money, the glory, the girls, absolutely everything. And then I pulled in, and the instructor came along and said, sir, I said, yes, is there anything else you could do for a living? So I said, well, yes. He said, do it. So that's the end of that. But anyway, the good news is that after Ford Motor Company, I ended up at Car Magazine, and British Car Magazine, where we also launched another one called Truck Magazine. So with these two, we had a lot of fun for something like 22 24 years. I had a partner, and then after 24 years, we sold the company. But something that is more relevant is maybe something to do with, well, a little bit of motor racing. I was in a demolition derby in Wimbledon, near the tennis, and I got hit from behind big time. And it was James Hunt. And James said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it." I said, "Yes, James, yes, yeah." So for the second half of the derby, my son Nicholas had to take over, and he actually won the race for Car Magazine. So that was rather nice. Now, there's a lot of hocus pocus about Nicky and James not liking each other, and Rush, tells it as it is. No. They were tremendous friends. Nicky would come and eat at our place, and he would say, "And now you will take me to 235 Kings Road, yeah?" And I would say, "I don't mind taking you, but what's happening at 235 Kings Road?" He said, "I'll be meeting my friend James Hunt." Sure enough, I said, "Who's James Hunt?" "Oh, he's a Formula 3 driver." And Nicky at that time was in Formula 2. And so this bit about, but of course you cannot sell a film with two good guys. So you had to have a bad guy. James was the bad guy. Funnily enough, in his private life, Nicky was just as naughty as James, but that's another story. Anyway, talking of that, there was, of course, another race in my life, slightly trickier. We had a little revolution in Hungary in 1956, and I had a gun. So the sensible thing seemed to do, so when the Russians came in, and obviously the locals came second, it's the only way I can put it, as we lost, I had to leave. So I got as far as the border, and then I ran across. Now, by then, they had guitars, and they were shooting, but I ran, and I was hoping that the bullets wouldn't hit me, and the bullets didn't hit me. So I got to Austria, and I crawled into the first pub, or whatever you might like to call it. Certainly wasn't a Starbucks, but whatever it was. And I opened the door, and the first thing I could hear, and this was my equivalent of people arriving from Europe and seeing the Statue of Liberty. My Statue of Liberty was Bill Haley and the Comets on the Wurlitzer, playing 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock. So that was pretty amazing. And then my Ellis Island was essentially a student hostel in Vienna, where the Brits were kind enough to give me a visa and gave me a chance to move on from Vienna and start a new life. So that was quite exciting. So I got past the Russians, I got past the Germans, finally got to England, and then the fun and games started. Because, as I said, Ford Motor Company, well, this actually, I digress, but Tim mentioned Sheffield. And this is where the book refers to luck. There I was at Sheffield, in the north of England, and a recruiter came along. Now, just imagine a similar situation today, anywhere in the United States, anywhere in the world. The guy turned up and said, "You get a degree, and you've got yourself a job." Just like that. And I got a letter, "Dear Andrew, £750, about $1,000 a year, which is a lot of money in those days." And sure enough, I got a degree, went straight to Ford, where I met some wonderful people. Colin Chapman used to come to the office because I was in purchasing, and he was forever coming into the office asking for money. I mean, Chunky Chapman spent money like you can't imagine. And then, of course, through him, I fell in love with the Jim Clarks of this world and Jackie Stewart and all the other guys. And that was pretty fantastic. But then I thought it was time to move on. And that's how I got involved with Car Magazine, which we were lucky to buy from the Hearst Corporation. The Hearst Corporation. I don't mean the shift. I mean the publishing company. This again was quite fortunate. A gentleman called Bill Jackson said to me, "Andrew, we're not making any money on Car Magazine. Would you like to buy it?" So I said, "Yes. How much?" And he said, $10,000. So I said, "Mr. Jackson, we don't have $10,000. Can I pay you in monthly installments of $100? And he said, "Yes." They must have been desperate. And then 24 years later, we sold it for a little bit more to a guy by the name of Rupert Murdoch. So I think it must have been $11,000. So anyway, that worked rather well. But we had a lot of fun and games whilst running car and also truck. And one of my favorite stories, nothing to do with cars, it's to do with trucks. I invented something called Truck of the Year. And every year we had a function, we had a dinner, and then we handed over the trophy to whoever it happened to be. And I'm talking big rigs, Peterbilt, Kenworth, that sort of thing. And it happened to be Volvo Truck Corporation, and the function was in Geneva. And I'm sitting next to the chairman of the board, and I just casually said to the German judge, I take it the trophy is okay. He said, "Nein, we have no trophy." I said, "Sorry?" He said, "We had Christmas in Germany." So I thought, oh, wait a minute. I thought Christmas was sort of a fairly worldwide type situation. No. He said, the engraver was busy. Goodbye. So I thought, oops. We had a function the following morning at 10. We had the international press. We had members of the union. We had all sorts of people there, big room, everything. And no trophy. So I looked across the room, and I spotted a champagne bucket. And I went up to the maître d', and in my pidgin French, and I said, "Monsieur, s'il vous plaît, would you mind terribly if I borrowed this champagne bucket for 24 hours? And he said, "You can't have it for 24 hours, you can have it till noon tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So I was up at 7, went to the only engraver in Geneva, and I said, "Could you please do a little plaque which says Volvo Corporation 19 something?" And they said, "Sure." But then, of course, we had to cover up the bit, because Hotel de la Paix was engraved into the champagne bucket. So, of course, you had to cover that up somehow. So then we got the super glue. We stuck the plaque right on top of this. And then comes the tricky bit. You go along to the CEO of a major corporation. Imagine, I don't know, Daimler Chrysler or whoever they are, Daimler or BMW or GM, anybody. And you say, "Excuse me, Joe, I've got a bit of a problem. Tomorrow morning you will receive a champagne bucket." And I said, "Relax, it's all under control. I will turn up with this bucket, covered in sort of a big sheet. You make your little speech, and at the end of it, I hand it over to you. You hold it up as high as possible, so nobody can really tell that it isn't a trophy. As soon as people have taken pictures, you give it back to me, I'll hide it, and we'll just carry on drinking." And for a Swede, I have to admit they don't have that much of a sense of humor, but he said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "I'll go with it." And we got away. So that was probably my greatest escape this side of getting away from Hungary. But that was a lot of fun. But as far as America is concerned, I have to say, I've lived here, I've lived there. I think it's a fantastic place, California, especially. I've been very, very lucky. How I got here, it's all in the book. My wife can't be here today because she's got a sore throat, but she's sending her love to everybody from the East Bay. Now, I've got a story. I just want to mention that everybody's over 18 because it's a little bit naughty, but not particularly. I've mentioned Cannonball. This was the very last illegal cannonball in 1979. And Brockett organized it. God bless him. He's still with us, but he's not very well. And I shipped across that truck from Britain, and we raced and we came absolutely last. But to be honest, there is no point in being anything other than first or last. And Dave Hines in a Jaguar came first in like 32 hours, and we came last in something like 48 hours. But then, of course, there was an after party, because the race finished at Redondo Beach, south of LA. And it was organized by somebody called Hal Needham. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of Hal Needham, Smokey and the Bandit, and the whole thing. Well, if anybody knew how to organize a party, it was Hal Needham. So I was minding my own business by the pool, nursing a Corona, true story, and two young ladies in the world's smallest bikinis came up to me and said, hello. So I thought, hello, how are you? And carried on drinking. And they said to me, should we go to your room? So I said, excuse me, it's July, it's not even Christmas, what's going on here? But I thought, what have I got to lose? And I was single at the time. So off we trotted to my room. And at that point, one of them said, do you have a $20 bill? And I still didn't know what was going on. So I said, yes. So she said, fine. With that, from that little mini bikini, she produced a small mirror. And some other thing. And to my absolute amazement, I've never ever seen this before, started chopping up some stuff which was beginning to look terribly white and all that. And I said, what do I do now? And he said, well, she said, you roll up this $20 bill and you sort of go. And at that point, I had a feeling that this wasn't quite kosher. I thought, But, like the good guy, I went, and then I sneezed. And the room was like sort of Colorado in January. So the two young ladies sort of looked at me and said something along the lines of, you silly boy, which is not exactly what they said. Slammed the door, and that's the last I've seen of them. So anyway, as they say, that's the end of my story, but I think Tim's got some questions up his iPhone. Tim, over to you, sir.
Andrew, we do. We thought we'd come up with some questions that would maybe be sort of thought-provoking to give you an idea of Andrew's car passion, automotive passion. So we sent him over 5 questions, I believe, and we'll see what the answers are. So if there was a transporter outside, yes, and you could load 5 cars onto it, any 5, they could be production cars, they could be competition cars, they could be concept cars from anywhere in the world, what would your top 5 cars be?
Well, let me explain that. Several of them have very personal sort of connotations. First of all, the one would have to be by White MGB from Britain from 1964-65. In those days, you know, I mean, the Beatles, we celebrated the Beatles' 50th anniversary, I believe, last night. Well, this was when the Beatles started. I've actually met the Beatles. They were fabulous people. And I did have a White MGB, and it was sort of the roaring 60s. And as they said, when sex was safe and driving was dangerous, it was a pretty fabulous time. Hence the MGB with, you know, the Borani wheels and the whole 9 yards, slightly tweaked. I took it to Monaco. It was glorious. So that's car number 1. The other car, which again I had for 17 years, was a Ferrari 328 GTS, which I absolutely loved. Again, took it all over Europe and didn't break down once in 17 years. So I was so impressed that I've even joined the Ferrari club now of the Pacific region of Ferrari like a couple of years ago. No, honestly. Then there's the 458 Spider, which I'm very partial to. There is the Bugatti Royale, which I think is just unbelievable. And finally, there is the Daytona. And this, in a way, links with the following question I think you had in mind. What would I like to drive across America in the next Cannonball? And it's the Daytona that Dan Gurney, whom I knew and know quite well, I would like to share the trip with Dan in that very same Daytona he and Brock Yates used when they won. Then they came across, well, non-stop in something like 35, 36 hours. And when the journalist said to Gurney, well, how fast were you going? And Dan said, I never got to 175 miles an hour. Well, which he didn't. He was doing 172. So that's the answer to that question.
So Now, I don't know if any of you have tried to come up with your top 10 car list. Trying to come up with a top 10 car list makes the top 100 difficult. Because you get to 100, and it's not so much what makes it on the list, it's what you leave behind. So here's the hard question. Of your top 5, you get to choose one.
I have to be honest, and not because there are some seriously good friends out here from the Ferrari Owners Club. For sheer thrill, it would have to be the 458 Spider. I've driven it in Italy quite extensively, and it's just completely unbelievable. The nearest thing to sheer thrill of today's cars would have to be the Gaillard, the Aventador Spider. Problem is that there is absolutely no room in that Lamborghini, not even for a toothbrush. And also, these cars tend not to break down. So if I were to say, oh, I would like to drive a blower Bentley, something went wrong, I honestly would not know what to do with it. So it has to be the 458 Spider.
Okay, so you've answered our third question. And the question was, if you, what car would you choose to drive coast to coast? And that could either be a leisurely Route 66, take your time, or it could be, I think I'm a Cannonball Run participant experience. So the Cobra Daytona Coupe is your answer. Another question we'd like to ask, if there was a person in automotive history that you could spend some time with, that could be lunch, dinner, or a drive somewhere, Riverside in 64 or wherever, who would that person be?
Well, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but my ultimate hero is Ayrton Senna. I knew him, I've interviewed him. When we lost him, I'll be honest, I cried for 3 weeks. I mean, like people committed suicide in Brazil, because of Ayrton. And to this day, Ayrton means even more than Michael Schumacher, who again was a great friend. I mean, those are the days when I was really, really active with Formula One and, interviewing and taking pictures and commentating and doing all that. I loved Ayrton. If you said who's with us today, I would say Jackie Stewart, because Jackie and I go back like 40, 45 years. I used to ski with his kids. He has a lovely sense of humor, and he's a brilliant driver. You may have seen on Top Gear, he went out with a guy called James May, and he said, James, do this, do that, do the other, and he improved his lap time by something of 15 or 20 seconds. And Jackie is an ambassador. He's a tremendous ambassador. I love the guy. I love Helen, the whole family. I mean, that's how he should be.
Yeah, he's one of. I've had a pleasure to do a couple of events with him over the years. I grew up about 2 miles from Brands Hatch, which during the 60s and 70s was where the British Grand Prix was held on alternative years. I spent many a misguided school day out at the racetrack. So we got to go out there to see everything. It was easy. A pair of wire cutters and a bicycle. So you cut a hole in the fence to get underneath, and you threw your bike over the top on the Grand Prix circuit. So the last question. If there was an automotive venue, an automotive location, historical, or an automotive event anywhere in the world, whether current or if you went back in time, which of those, where would that be?
Well, can I have two, please? Just very, very briefly, I would love to drive at Duesenberg and get Best in Show at Pebble. That would be absolutely wonderful. And the other, which is slightly crazy, but having what I would love is something equally exotic, Hispano Suiza, something like that. Drive it to the Hollywood Bowl, get out of the car, get in front of the orchestra, and conduct something along the overture, like something like Marriage of Figaro or something like that. And the reason I'm saying it, because I did conduct, as a guest conductor, the girls' choir at Davis Hall, and I loved it. So I think that would be a lot of fun to do it, having arrived there in something very, very special.
Interesting choice. I think that there's a lot of people on the list of winning Best of Show at Pebble Beach. Oh, I don't know about winning. There's lots of members of the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Club that'd love for that to happen. So, Andrew, thank you. They were interesting. So, questions? Anybody have any questions for Andrew? We're a very tame group this morning. In the back.
It was a little pickup with a trick sort of third axle, which was just there to make it look like a big rig. We had twin stacks. We had a V6 engine. We of course got CB radios and all sorts of things. Like we didn't quite understand, breaker 19, breaker 19. I didn't really. I mean, it was very interesting. But the big rigs took us into their hearts, and they all said, hey Mac, what's this little thing you're driving there? And we sort of tried to explain, and then they said, look out, there's bear in the air. So I thought, what's that? And we had to get a whole dictionary to find out what all this was about. But it was wonderful. It was completely unforgettable. Really unforgettable. Sir? I honestly don't know. Any old Duesenberg, and it wouldn't be. I just don't know enough about it. To me, a Duesenberg is something up there, something very special. But if you've got one, I would love to. Oh, great. Thank you very much, I will.
Anybody else have any other questions? Sir.
Who do you like at Mercedes,
Nicky or? Oh, well, or even the guy whom I really don't like, Rosberg, who I'm afraid does absolutely nothing. I mean, he's just a spoiled playboy in my book. Lewis, unfortunately, I knew Lewis when he started in Formula One. Unfortunately, mentally, he's not quite there. When I say mentally, he's not quite there. He gets wrapped up in showbiz. He spends too much time with rock artists. Then he gets involved with this very bizarre lady who spent all her time in the pits making sure that the camera was on her. And as soon as she could see the camera, she was sort of there. And I think all these distractions did not help. Plus, he fell out with his father, and he got a huge private jet, and he believed that he really was the greatest. He has mental problems. When I say mental problems, don't get me wrong, but he's not as bright or as sharp as Vettel or as Alonso, in my opinion. But Nicky is razor sharp. Of course.
Sounds like some things don't change in Formula One. For those of you who've seen the Rush movie.
Yes, I mean, Nicky, of course, had an airline, and of course, I mean, Nicky is just a very special person. He's trying to pull the team together. They have an awful lot of money, but they've lost Ross Brawn, so I'm not quite. He's gone fishing, literally, as they say, and I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. I hate this new formula for 2014. I think it's absolutely farcical. I think someone's trying to get some sort of a Nobel Prize or something from the FIA for ruining what was perfectly fine. And I've yet to meet a single solitary person who says, I can't wait to hear those engines, except I can't hear them because it's all pat. And of course, most of us in this room can remember V12s or V10s or V8s. It's sad. The only people who seem to be sticking with Formula One in a way after leaving it are Toyota. I mean, they're utilizing their V10 engine in rather rapid sort of street cars, and full credit to them. And Ferrari, of course. But so that's how I feel about Mr. Rosberg and Mr. Hamilton. On his day, you can't stop Lewis. But he doesn't have too many days.
Anybody else have a question?
Formula One race? Well, in terms of friendship and hospitality, it has to be Austin, Texas. I have never in my life met such wonderful, wonderful people. It's a fabulous circuit. Someone put a lot of money into it, and full credit to the Texans. They said, we're going to build it, and it's going to be fabulous, and they built it, and it is fabulous. And I love the way the locals actually made some money out of it in the nicest possible way. You got within 3 miles of the track, and somebody would say, "Psst, mister, do you want to leave your car here? We'll run you up to the track. You phone us when you're finished, and we'll come and get you." You know, and oh, by the way, we'll have some burgers ready when you get back. So it was wonderful, and I didn't meet a single unfriendly person, whether it was a taxi driver or... I think it's marvelous. It's a tribute to Austin, to Texas, to the United States, and long may it continue. And that first corner, as you go up the hill and hang a left, that's pretty amazing as well. I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. Because Monaco is too obvious. You know, Monaco is too showbiz in a way, and we've either been there or seen it 1,000 times. But to see, and of course the Glen, Watkins Glen was something else. I mean, Watkins Glen was magic, as I'm sure many of you know. Except when they burned the Brazilian bus, but that's another story.
Anybody else have any questions? Shane.
There are no microphones here, I take it. There's nobody nobody's sort of recording this. It was last year in an F12 on the way. There's an autostrada not too far from the factory, and we had to get back in a hurry. And my son Nicholas was in a Lamborghini Aventador, and I was in this F12. And at one point we were doing, I think it was 182 miles an hour, but not for long. Just, we were trying to, and then I chickened out. At 182 I chickened out, I have to admit. I mean, this is miles, not kilometers. So that was fun. That F12? Oh, absolutely no. You just go boom. Honestly, I mean, you need a bit of a tunnel vision. It does feel as though the road is like that. But no, it was glorious. It was glorious. So that was good. I've been fairly quick in some other things as well. I tell you what was very quick, but obviously not at 180. 2 weeks ago, I tested the new Stingray. Fabulous car. Absolutely fabulous. And if I had another choice to go across America, I would be very, very happy in that Stingray. Because in a way, that Stingray is America. It's as American as apple pie. And if I were to break down anywhere, you go to the nearest Chevy dealer, and they can give you the parts for that 6.2-liter engine. I'm sorry. I love the engine. I love the gearbox. It was a 6-speed gearbox, 6, 7. I think it was 7. I had it very briefly, but I just love that it was screwed together. It was beautifully screwed together. It looks very good. I mean, it stops the traffic. I was driving it with my grandson, Freddie, and he'll testify. People rush up to you, and everybody has a Corvette story. Oh, I had one, my father had one, my grandfather had one. So it's not as fancy, it's not so esoteric as a Ferrari. Everybody can relate to it. And I could still relate to it. I would have been very happy to keep it. And the seats were good. I think for $60,000, it's got to be the best value car in the world that does 200 miles an hour, or call it 190. It's fabulous.
Who do you suppose might succeed Bernie, whether he goes to jail or not?
Well, in case you haven't heard, Bernie will live forever. Yeah, I'm surprised that you even asked the question. No, yeah. No, but seriously, as long as Bernie is alive, even if he's in jail, he will still run the show. And Bernie had many, many friends, funnily enough, not too far from where we lived in Kent in England, and many of them ended up in jail. I mean, there was something called the Great Train Robbery in Britain back in 1996. Those guys, when they came out, they found some of the money here, there, and everywhere. And apart from one who went to Brazil, Ronnie Biggs, they all lived in one street, and they're all Bernie's friends. So when Bernie's, may I 2 more minutes? Yeah? So when Bernie, who lived in Chelsea Square, not too far from Harrods. Bernie was attacked with, and his wife, the previous wife, Slavica, a very tall lady, she was mugged, and they ripped a finger off $1 million ring off her finger. Luckily, they left the finger on, but the ring was gone. And Bernie said, well, they gave me a slip at the police saying, well, this is your claims form. Terrific. He said, I put the word out, said Bernie. And the boys who did it haven't been seen since. And he meant it. Bernie is on record to say, I don't think I've ever had anyone killed. And he sort of goes like this. And nobody, I mean, there is a very famous journalist, I'm not going to, I'm sure you would know him, who got beaten up big time because he picked on Bernie. And they beat him for about 15, 20 miles in the back of one of these pickup trucks, U-Haul jobs, and threw him into a ditch. And since then, he's been as good as gold. You don't mess with Bernie. Nobody messes with Bernie. What comes after him? I don't know. I really don't know. Let's not forget that Bernie made a lot of money for a lot of people. Ron Dennis was working as a mechanic for Jack Brabham in 1970. Ron now has an estate not too far from London. He bought it for $50 million. He travels by private jet. I've got pictures of him actually filling up Jack Brabham's car at Spa in 1970. So he's come a long way. Frank Williams, another millionaire, unfortunately is not well, but you know what I mean. Lots and lots. You watch the number of private jets coming to Nice airport before the Grand Prix. You would be astonished. So Bernie he built this sport up from very, very little. He's done a fantastic job. It's obviously overhyped. I don't think the racing is as good as he would like us to believe. But I admire him. And he would, as you know, he would like to have the guy from Red Bull to take over. But Montezemolo is against it, and Luca, of course, is a very powerful person. I don't know, but there will never, ever be another Bernie. Yes. Well, I think that team would probably stop me.
What were yours, Andrew?
But because Ayrton was not just my hero, but I mean, you're Brazilian, and I'm sure you saw the photographs, and you saw that 3 million people turned up to say goodbye, and all the fire engines, and the entire Brazilian Air Force, all 5 planes, were all, doing the fly past. And to this day, to millions and millions all over the world, Senna means Brazil, and Brazil means Senna. I interviewed him several times. Lovely, lovely person. Last time I actually saw him like this was in Monaco. He was having dinner with Ron Dennis, having just won the race in '93. And he was there with his girlfriend in this restaurant called Rampoldi. And first he waved, and I said, obviously waved back. And then he said goodbye to everybody and came out and got on his Ducati. And the blonde girl got on behind, and boom, they were off. It's impossible. I mean, everyone who's ever met him or saw him race, or if you see the film from Monaco where he's changing gear and breaking the lap record, the guy's a genius. And I just hope, as far as Brazil is concerned, I just hope that you'll be all right with the football, and I hope you will be all right with the Olympics, because it's a big job. And like everybody else, the whole world loves Brazil, and I would love you guys to succeed.
I was fortunate to go down to the Brazilian Grand Prix. It was the last race of the season. It was going to be Schumacher's last race, his first time retiring, and it was a championship deciding race. And I was in Fort Lauderdale with a 4-day window between events, and a friend of mine was principal of the short-lived Spiker F1 team, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I wish I was joining you, go down to Brazil, and I ended up going down there for the weekend, and it was quite an experience. That's one of the few tracks that hasn't changed in time. most of us look at Formula One and you see the pit row suites like they are in Austin or those places. There is no, well, they create the Paddock Club down there, but there is no place for the transporters or the hospitality. They have about 20 of those tables, and all the teams just share. So we were sitting next to Rubens at one time. It was a great experience. And I was living in Southern California at the time, and anybody thinks LA's big, go down to Sao Paulo. Anyway, any other questions? Yes.
It's probably Michael Schumacher's, well, there are two. It's either Schumacher's championship-winning Ferrari or Ayrton's, again, championship-winning McLaren. I think those were quite exceptional automobiles. And I wish we could still race with those and not with what we're about to get.
Anyway, well, that looks to be, and I said, oh, Garth.
Well, I was fortunate enough to know, obviously, Brock Yates has got to be number one or up there. The other one, of course, is David E. Davis. We very, very nearly started Car Magazine in America. Unfortunately, my partner at the time was afraid that he would lose his 50-50 in the business, which he would have done. But I would have been delighted to work with David E. I loved him as a person, loved him as a writer. Apart from those two who are up at the top, I do like Dan Neil in the Wall Street Journal. He does occasionally get a little bit carried away and looks up words in the dictionary that even he doesn't know. It's quite obvious that, I mean, he has his Greek kick and his Latin kick, and then he puts in words just to please himself, I suppose. But it's nice instead of, it's very fast, or it's very slow. I look at all the magazines, the automobiles and the car and drivers. I don't think anybody can touch David E., and I don't think anybody can touch Brock, really. At least I can't think of anyone. And Nigel Roebuck is very good, but of course he's British. He writes for Motorsport. He's excellent. Nigel Roebuck is far and away the best in Britain, I would say.
Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
A couple of closing comments. Our next two speaker series, there's postcards on there. In March, we have a gentleman by the name of Jim Wangers. Jim's attributed as sort of the godfather of the GTO. He had nothing to do with mechanically. He was the marketing genius that created the muscle car world as we know it. And then following that, in April, we're very fortunate, and we have Pete Brock coming up here.
Very good.
Pete's recently you mentioned the Stingray. He was again attributed to the design of the 63 Stingray, although he wasn't at GM at the time it actually got launched. I think Datsun 510 owners pay homage to him, and the anniversary of the Daytona Cobras championship win is probably a good tribute. So Pete's going to join us on April 27th. But Andrew, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Anybody interested in picking up a copy of Andrew's book and having it personalized, please do. Enjoy the museum for however long you want to stay. Thanks again.